Welcome to the CLI-ALPMA Innovation and Legaltech Week 2021. This is the on-demand program, and my name is Sam Burrett. I'm joined by Peter Dombkins today to discuss legal project management. And Peter, I believe this is a topic that you know something about, and I'll give you a very brief introduction, and then I'll let you make sure that I've got all your letters right. So Peter is one of Australia's foremost thinkers and practitioners as well of legal project management. He's a national leader in legal transformation, legal operations as well. He's Australia's first adjunct associate professor in legal transformation at the University of New South Wales. Peter is also the first legal project manager to be AIPM peer accredited, which sounds very impressive to me, Peter, but you might need to explain that in a second. And last but not least, it's worth noting that Peter is also the Vice President of the Australian Society for Computers and Law in New South Wales and the Managing Editor of their journal. Peter, you've told me before that people call you a pracademic. Amongst all these letters, all these different titles, can you tell me a little bit about why we're here talking about legal project management and what you do?
Thank you very much for the very kind and warm introduction, Sam. A pracademic, well, I guess I've been called worse in my time, but I'll take that. Yeah, it's a little bit on that one. It's because I think it's useful to have theory-informed behaviour and practice. A lot of project management, not just in the legal profession, in other professions like engineering, for example, people still become accidental project managers. So they start off as in early career, they start off as technicians, or in our case, lawyers. We come out of law school, we know the priestly 11, we know a bit about administrative law and real estate and IP and constitutional law. We've read our cases and we rock up day one and we realize that law is a service. Law isn't necessarily just, in that context, an academic pursuit. And so we need to understand how to deliver law. It's a bit like the doctor understanding bedside manner. They need to be able to diagnose what an issue is and then act upon it in such a way that the patient will accept the medicine. And so no different to some of the kind of already foreshadowing there, some of the challenges as a legal project manager in helping diagnose, understand how to help lawyers better deliver their work. And then doing so in such a way that they feel compelled and interested to actually adopt those practices. So why we're here today is to answer your question, precisely that, to help lawyers deliver their work. We got taught the law, that's great, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to practice it and oftentimes people, particularly in say private practice or in in-house, people are coming to lawyers because they wanted to do something or stop someone from doing something, right? And we need to be able to help enable that. LPM is, let's kind of roll with this actually as part of a definition. Applying principles of project management to legal work. Simple definition.
Yeah, and keen to dive in a little bit more and to foreshadow the rest of the conversation. We're going to chat now a little bit about the context of what is LPM and why is it relevant in 2021, especially before we dive into three key points, which will probably naturally flow from our conversation, the key elements of legal project management, what people do when they're implementing legal project management, so what tools and software they use, and then practical steps that people can take away from this session to hopefully implement some of the ideas that they can draw from legal project management to implement those into their firm or into their legal department moving forward. And so to run with the conversation, you mentioned legal project management is taking principles from project management and applying it to the legal industry. So what are those principles? What is project management? I didn't learn that at law school.
Yeah, correct. True that. And actually on that, it's a new discipline. When we start talking about legal project management, let's not forget the term itself has only been around for just over a decade. It was first coined in the American Lawyer in about 2010. The first law firm to start saying that it had provided its lawyers with LPM training, I think it was Deckett, a US-based firm, and that was around the same time, 2009, 2010. So
it is really new. We're talking 10, 11 years,
just over a decade. With that said, though, the underlying principles, lawyers have been doing project management since there were lawyers. They just didn't realize it. Because every legal brief that you receive is a project by definition. It has a start point, an end point, and it has an output. That's about the most simple definition of project we can come up with. And it aligns with, there's more formalized definitions put together, for example, by what's referred to as the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK. That's a globally recognized repository of project management principles and techniques. There's similar ones put together by the Association for Project Management called the Prince2 methodology. These definitions about what a project is are fairly consistent. And by those definitions, all legal work is a project. Now, when people think project management, they usually think, a hard hat, high vis vest. They think construction. They think maybe procurement.
An office, a project office, like we spoke about.
Absolutely, a project site office. Big plans, burly foreman. They're the images. It's not exactly Mr. Shiny Shoe professional services, white collar work, but absolutely that project management is very relevant to those areas as well. Large sums still involved. Do we need to define what we're doing? Do we need to define who's involved and how much and how long, how much it costs and how long it's going to take? Are there risks involved? Do we need to understand how we're going to report upon what's been done, tracking, and communicate those? Communicate if there's changes, in the unlikely event that something changes. Of course, how often, almost every legal matter, something's going to change at some point, and then and that's even in the more structured stuff, let alone litigation. So we need to have mechanisms, governance mechanisms for how we communicate those changes, escalation points for whether those changes or when disagreements are, how those disagreements are resolved. All of these areas are areas that are looked at by project management. Now, the big difference is that in a construction environment, you will also have a lot of resources dedicated to the processes and artifacts associated with all those areas. So you have you'll have a very complicated project schedule, and you'll have a team of schedulers who do nothing but update the schedule. You'll have a risk register, which classifies all the risks and quantifies them and understands when they crystallize and what the mitigation strategies will be and how they will be enacted. And you have someone called the risk officer who does nothing other than update and manage the risk register. You have an overall program plan and a program director. It's a mapping of resources of human resources to artifacts and processes. And it works like a treat. It works really well. Problem is, of course, in legal setting, we don't have that luxury of the resourcing. We don't have a team, the lawyers will not have, they might be lucky if they're in a in-house environment to have maybe a legal operations professional. Usually it seems about the magic size is about 10 or above lawyers, depending upon which stats you look at, whether it's clock or Altman Wheel or ACC, and which industry. But between 10 and 20 lawyers will then start to have a dedicated legal ops professional covering the whole team. In your top tier law firms, you might have a team of LPM, legal project managers, supporting an entire national practice, right? These resources are spread thin. So you don't have to, usually as a lawyer, you don't have the luxury of knowing, well, I can just delegate all the project management stuff to someone else. They'll do the risk register, they'll do the schedule, they'll do the scoping and pricing. I can just do the law. Doesn't work that way. The only people that are like that are basically judges. They get to do just the law and everyone else does the process around them. Everyone else has to do a bit of process. And that's when we talk about legal project management. We take parts of traditional project management, adapt them, simplify them where appropriate for lawyers. So because the lawyers are needing to effectively build the car whilst they're driving it. You need to be able to do the legal work as well as plan it, as well as report upon it, as well as track it. And so we need to make it process light.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And there's actually a lot that we're going to unpack there over the next 30 minutes or so. And imagine people listening to this, Peter, they're probably in the innovation legal technology world. They're probably already thinking about how they can improve their law firm or their legal department. And they might be hearing other people talk about legal technology or talk about sales and business development within law firms. There's often a lot to take in when we talk about how to improve the practice of law. And so one thing I want to get covered right off the bat is, why should lawyers care about legal project management? It sounds like it can be really great, but why should lawyers care, and why do you care so much about it?
Well, if I don't care about Gantt charts, who will, buddy? It's hiding to nothing. Okay, in terms of what are the benefits? Why would I do this? Because because I argue with this. If you're going to come up with LPM, as with anything, and you're just saying, well, do it to make me happy, do it because I said so. Do it as a compliance requirement, because somewhere best practice is apparently I have to do project management. So I guess I'll just do it, even though I don't understand why, and it seems to be taking up my time. That is a recipe to make sure that people don't do things. They just won't. Lawyers are busy. They don't have time to be engaging in these types of superfluous, what they regard as superfluous activities.
Sure.
There's when you do, if you have the luck of doing your TAE 40116, which is a Cert 4 in training, which I had to do as part of being a national project management accreditor, you learn that adult learners need to be shown the value of what they're doing. And lawyers, I think, are a hyper form of the adult learner, where I need to see the benefit in about 5 minutes or I'm out. So with that, let's get into what the benefits are. There's an interesting piece of research actually done by the International Legal Technology Association. They had a white paper for about 1.5 years ago, actually on project management. And it was looking about what the impact of project management was on your organization, looking specifically at law firms. And the two biggest areas were that expectations are managed more effectively and that projects are more closely aligned with business goals. The leading cause of project failure, which I found incredible and incredulous, was that it was delivering the wrong thing.
Right.
Which is nuts, because when you put all your effort goes into doing the thing, building whatever it is, drafting. Why would you spend all your effort on the wrong thing? But it is the leading cause of failure.
It's crazy. You're talking about lawyers here, right? And they put all this, not to mention all of their study, but all this effort, time, and energy on researching and then writing this, what I'm sure is a perfect advice that goes to a partner and is then sent out to a client, and it's the wrong thing. Like, that's just devastating to think the scale that actually happens is probably massive.
Absolutely. And I mean, yes, exactly, which then leads to a whole range of other issues in terms of then you end up with cost, right? Practically, if you've delivered something which is not hitting the mark, which hasn't have a good commercial sense of commercial acumen. If you've delivered a 10-page draft and all they wanted was a half-page, tell me what I need to know. Not only have you wasted time, and potentially, assuming you're not going to get the client to pay for that, so it's going to be a write-down. You've also you've potentially upset a client. You've wasted your own time. You presumably had to work on over the weekend or something to get that done. So that's an opportunity cost for the time you could have spent on other matters. It's a real no-win situation to be doing it. So but of course the reason we do this is because we buy into the sense of urgency at the start. The client will come to us with a sense of urgency. We buy into that. It's the ready, fire, aim approach. So we just quick see the problem and start shooting, and then work out later whether it was necessarily the right direction to head in. So key part of project management is stopping, pausing, taking a breath, and working. And being the advisor, the strategic advisor that the client needs during that time, being the calm hand on the rudder that steers them through, right? Being more than,
and that's a position that we want to be in as lawyers, right?
Precisely. So, I mean, there's some of the two big benefits. The other benefits would be, I think, certainly in terms of day-to-day, you end up with more predictable timeframes and costs. That's obviously better particularly if we're talking about in-house team then procuring services from a panel firm or from external advisors. The in-house team will need usually to have set they operate the budgets, right? So they need to know upfront broadly how much it's going to cost, and they want to then usually stick to that, or have outside of exceptional circumstances. So they want predictable timeframes and costs. This is equally true of barristers in the courts. I recently delivered LPM training for the New South Wales Barristers Association, and that was very fascinating discussions where they talked about how judges, ask barristers their estimate for how long things will take, and they wildly vary to the point where judges will either dismiss those estimates out of hand, or as one slightly acerbic barrister suggested, what they do is they just get all the estimates from all of counsel and add them all together, and then they end up with a macro number, and that's about right. So it's a matter of trust, right? So reliability, predictable timeframes and costs, minimizing surprises, risks, and the stress associated with that. The ability to control your own schedule, because you're not being given work at the last minute by one of your colleagues who they hadn't planned for it. They knew that they were going to have to ask your input a month ago. It was clearly necessary. You're a necessary part of this process, but they just didn't inform you until yesterday. And now they need your response tomorrow. So suddenly you're swept up in the urgency of their mismanagement. So trying to collectively reduce the mismanagement. In a way, there's this one phrase I love, and it's, I think, very true. A rising tide raises all boats. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to collectively raise the broader project management competence of not just an organization, but of the profession. So it's a better planned, less stressful environment to work in.
Yeah, I love that. And as the human side of all this is really linked, for me at least, to the stress that you're talking about there. Is how do we make the working conditions for lawyers, especially in top tier law firms, but across the board, more amenable, but more directly linked to the value that they want to create for their clients as well? How do we make lawyers less stressed and at the same time deliver better services to their clients? It seems like you've got the golden egg to get us there, Peter. What I want to know though, and I imagine people who are now sold, because you've sold us so well on legal project management, imagine the notion is, so what does it actually look like in practice away from the theory? And maybe you can put your academic hat on and tell me a little bit about what it looked like at Gilbert and Tobin, or what it's looked like for you in the past.
Yep, and even so, G&T at PwC now. Basically, in terms of, there's a couple of stages to it. So there's in PMBOK, there's a 5-stage model for project management. So initiating, so like a business case, then planning, monitoring, and controlling, implementation, and closeout. We've got usually the LPM frameworks revolve around similar types of stages. I've suggested I've actually got with a couple of UNSW colleagues, we've got an academic article coming out on LPM shortly, which very, very sexy. So yeah, you guys, I think I'll refer to it later in the session. But we come up with our own definition of LPM, very much around the strategizing, planning, costing, tracking, and reporting of legal work. So if you can think of all of those type of activities, it usually involves constraints. So understanding, as we mentioned earlier, the time, cost, quality constraint, for example. It usually involves teams. That might even just be a team of 2, you and the client, but that's still a team. And that usually it captures data and feedback to improve future performance. So there's a bit of an iterative learning or continuous improvement element to it. So that, from a definitional perspective, that's what I'm talking about by LPM. In a practical context, let's just kind of step that out a bit. So at the start, it will be, even before we've had a kickoff meeting, it will be the understanding what does success, so client calls. It will be understanding what success looks like to them. So understanding what their drivers are, what they're trying, the big picture of what they're trying to achieve. Asking questions like, have we done this before? Instead of, there's oftentimes a predisposition to go and reinvent the wheel. Actually asking, has a colleague done similar work? Can we quickly learn from that? What are the key risks, like large macro level risks associated with this? Asking some of these big picture questions. Then, once we've got that, having a kickoff meeting with the team, which implies already that we've done a lot of work in identifying who's actually even in the team, who the key stakeholders are. And once we've had that big picture discussion, we're having a kickoff, we can then start to discuss some of the more finer details in terms of the scoping. So what are we actually trying to achieve? What the key deadlines and milestones are? What the associated, are there particular price constraints that we need to understand? Who the team will be, what resources we need now and ongoing, how the team's going to communicate with each other. But not just internally, but also the broader team with the client. And I kind of aforementioned, how we're going to communicate and control changes. So it's effectively setting up a reporting and governance framework. How is the team establish a team, and what are we trying to achieve? How are we going to work together? That is, in a nutshell, kind of what are we going to do? That's your upfront project management. And that's where, if you're in a firm that's lucky enough to have a legal project management specialist, that's the point where they can really add value to come up and that initial planning part. Once we've got that sorted out, we can then move into what I'd refer to as more project administration. That's the data. Once we've got the plan, we know how we're going to talk with each other. Now it's just a matter of following the train following the tracks down the rails, right? We're just going to put those processes into play. We'll have, say, a weekly check-in meeting where we understand what's being done and what hasn't been done and why. Maybe at halfway through the matter, we might have a bit of a retro, which is a bit of more of a deep dive discussion about what's going well, what's not working well, what are we doing okay but could do better. Where we ask questions like, is everyone actually okay? Is the workload manageable? Does everyone actually understand what's going on? Just checking in. Some of these key questions. But so that's practically then what your project management look like day to day. And you would have a key part of this is to recognize that, and I think I've seen this happen too often as a pitfall, that lawyers hope that they can just delegate all of this to someone else. Just like, oh, well, I'm a senior lawyer, I'm a partner, and I'll just give it to we know that we've got to have project management. This comes back to the whole compliance thing about, making sure it adds value. If it's just compliance and it's like, okay, so we've got a task list and we had a fortnightly meeting and there was a junior lawyer who just sat there and kind of ticked tasks off, not really understanding what they were. And we basically didn't really change our mindset or behavior. That's not really adding value. That's project management as a compliance function. Project management works best if everyone takes part. It's shared accountability and responsibility. So that if there's a task list, and it helps when you set up processes like a collaborative environment, particularly if it's a digital collaborative environment for tracking tasks, where individuals can actually update the status of their own tasks, rather than having the project manager chase you up. Have you done this? Have you done that? No, get in there and damn well update it yourself. If it's my task, it's my responsibility. And by that shared accountability and responsibility, that's when project management really comes alive.
That's awesome, and really vivid description there. It makes me think back to some experiences that I've had where it almost felt like we had some of these principles in play. I was working on a large piece of litigation. We had a really tight team. We had really regular check-ins. The client knew what we were working on, and we knew exactly who was doing what within the team. We didn't necessarily have this process or this framework, or even really call it legal project management. But I think a lot of people listening to this or watching this would probably think of times where they've run a matter really, really well. And they've probably incorporated a lot of these elements into that matter and that experience. And so my next question then is obviously, how do we make that happen more frequently? How do we have more of these great experiences where we are all working together and we all love each other and there's lots of high fives and backslapping and the client loves us? What's the process of actually, making legal project management a thing within a firm or within a legal department?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So then we get into, basically it's change. This is organizational change management, right?
Right.
This starting to get into, where do you start?
Right.
Now, there's an interesting, by way of answering that, this is a twofold answer. First of all, hopefully some of the listeners might be know what the innovation bell curve or innovation diffusion bell curve is. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you Google it, Innovation Diffusion Bell Curve. And what it just simply says is that it's indicating who do you start with. There's going to be some people that always want to adopt the change. They're the ones that will line up for the new iPhone, right? 2 days in advance, and they're happy to do it. Yeah, I look at them and go, "You nuts!" That they want to do that, right? Yeah. And they don't care if it's crap or not. They're just like, can't wait. They drank the Kool-Aid. At the other end of the extreme, you've got the people that are never going to adopt the change, no matter how well you sell it. No matter, even if it's the obvious, even if they're told to, they will not, right? And between those two extremes, you've got a bit of a bell curve. Yeah, so people that are kind of from always and early adopters, and then the majority, and then kind of the late adopters, and then the nevers. And so it asks, where do we start, right? Well, you've got the always people are already in your bag. Like when it comes to LPM, there's going to be a couple of people that when you talk to them, they say, yes, I've been waiting for this forever, or in fact, I'm already doing it. Here's my OneNote, and here, they proudly show you their task lists. And I've had this experience, right? And they're proudly, and they're usually known amongst their peers as they were the ones that I spoke to first, because they were the ones that were known by their peers as, they really are on top of things. Their matters that they run are really well managed. Things aren't, the lawyer doesn't have to keep all of this stuff in their head. It's actually written down somewhere. It's easily tracked. Which is it's much less risk profile than trying to just remember everything. So they're known. But then you've got a group of people. But that only represents statistically about 2% of the population in your bell curve, right? 2%. 2% is not going to get you anywhere. So what you need then is you need the next group, the early adopters. They're not going to, they need a little bit of persuasion, right? They're interested. They're going to give you the time of day. They'll listen. And in fact, they might even start to do it, but they're not just going to do it default. They're going to need a little bit of something. They're going to need to show me the benefits, maybe show me somewhere where this has been done before. All right, I'll work. Let's start on a pilot, on a low risk pilot. They're the kind of conversations you're having, and they represent normally statistically about say 13 to 15, about 15%, right? They're the ones that you need, because then the bigger majority after them, which represents about 30%, they're not going to move before the early adopters have moved. So the early adopters are really the key people that you need to focus on. So between them and your always people, how do you find them? By talking to the organization. You'll have a sense of when we run any sort of consultancy, and when I've helped establish LPM capabilities in law firms, it always starts with a diagnostic. It starts with candid conversation with the legal team to understand, and you very quickly pick up who are the people that are going to give you the time of day, and who are the people that well, I tried using Excel once in 1985 and it didn't like it, and I'm never trying it again, right? So it's kind of, and you understand who both of them are. Once you've figured that out, then we start moving into organizational change. There's a lot of literature out there. I'm on record having spoken extensively about this as well. You can just go to my LinkedIn profile. There's a bunch of material on there. A couple of the major frameworks would be the Kotter's 8-step model, the Prosky-Adkar model. They all broadly follow the same approach. With organizational change, it's basically the simplest definition I came across was from the Association of Project Management, which is it's a way of getting an organization from where it is to where it wants to be. That's organizational change. Makes sense to me. But broadly, we start off with a sense of urgency. There's got to be a reason to change. It can't just be because you want it, just because I read it in a book somewhere. There's got to be a personal reason for the individuals involved, which is oftentimes why I started off with, say, senior lawyers or senior associates. They were the ones that really, in a private practice environment, they're the ones that really feel the crunch because they're reporting up and they're managing down, right? They're the ones that ultimately are doing a lot of the project management, frankly. They're managing the team. They're tracking what's going on. They're reporting it to the partner and to the client. They're the lieutenant that's making stuff happen, right? So they're often the ones that are most going to benefit from project management. So talking with them, getting a coalition of people that are willing to do it, clearly articulating why we're trying to change, create a vision, a clear vision. If the only way you articulate why you need LPM is an academic paper, you're probably going to lose your audience, right? You've got to have your sales pitch ready about these are the benefits and this is why. And the more concrete, the better. Communicate that vision broadly, and then start off with starting to supplement that with training and clear pilot projects, so that when people go to implement it, it's well received. There's no harm in creating a very, find the simplest project with the most willing team and the most onboard client, right? The closest thing to a slam dunk you can get. There is no shame in that. It is great change management to start off with a sure win as your first pilot, because you've got to build confidence and trust that this stuff actually works. People want to see their faith validated when you talked about the potential benefits. And once you've gone through all of that process, then you've got to do it all again, time and time again, because of, well, when people get stressed, they revert back to their old behaviors. It's plenty of studies showing this. I refer to it as corporate amnesia. People forget, or they get stressed. I'll go back to what worked previously. And that's fine. You understand that. And then you start the conversation again and you work through the process again. Takes, that's why organizational change can take, usually will take years. That's why, depending upon the statistics that you look at, 60 to 80% of change programs fail. There's a lot of, there's discussion about what that means by failure, but normally it means not delivering, what the initial intention of the change program was. So recognizing that and having the stamina and the senior organizational support to recognize that this will take time, because you're talking about mindset and behavioral change here. Another paper I've got published, it was midnight 2019, it was in Legal Business World. I talked about the difference between simple, complicated, and complex projects.
That's a good one. I have read that, and I actually really enjoyed that, and it's accessible.
It's definitely worth looking at in terms of the where you might want to start in terms of implementing LPM. When it comes to simple change programs or simple change, this is very much, we're just talking about a workflow process improvement. Maybe we're trying to automate a single document, right, or automate a single process. I want my NDAs streamlined. I want my internal approvals streamlined. Great. So I like delegated authority, for example, with an in-house environment. Common issue. Is there a way of simplifying this? And you build a little widget. Great. We've got a pretty good sense of certainty in what we're doing and how we're going to go about it. We can optimize that process. Has it really required the lawyers to fundamentally change how they think about themselves or what their value is or how they go about their work? No, it might have just made them a little bit faster. Right. At the other end, you've got complex change, which is very much around the organizational change I just mentioned, where it's very hard to plan on day one exactly what's going to happen. So we need to have more incremental approaches, kind of stop, periscope up, look around, pivot if necessary, constantly winning people over and evolving our approach. And then you've got kind of the big gray in between of complicated projects. So yes, I'd recommend if maybe we can post a link or something as part of this. Part of this, I'll put a link to the article.
I've got a few things to follow up on, and we'll try and include the resources in the show notes. We've got about 10 minutes left, Peter. We've got a couple of questions. If we sort of step back from the discussion so far, I feel like we've made a really good case for why legal project management is valuable and presented an overview of what it is and how to implement it. One question on the implementation before we move on is, what would be the difference between establishing a legal project manager role or a legal project management team versus simply educating people about principles of legal project management that they could then go on and implement into their day-to-day work? And so this is a question, I guess, about ownership. Should individuals within the firm own that and apply it to their own work? Or is it always necessary to set up a body and a legal project manager within the firm to run these principles?
That's a great question. My initial response is that this has to be a capability which, and this is aligned with what I've been saying to date in this session, it needs to be owned by lawyers themselves. This should be part, I think I know it's been spoken about to death over the past couple of years, that T-shaped model for competency development. We need to be broader than just legal. Matter management and delivery of services arguably is actually part of our uniform code professional responsibilities, in fact, depending upon how you read them. So I would suggest that this is a requirement of the lawyers themselves. If you so happen to be lucky enough to then be a firm or an in-house team with a significant enough budget to be able to afford a legal operations specialist or an LPM specialist, huzzah. Yeah, great. That's wonderful. Then we can start to potentially also, because then you've got someone that can help guide the journey. Someone that can help understand, okay, so here's how LPM is best adapted to our particular circumstance and how it best marries and integrates with our existing processes. That's excellent. Who can help even provide that I mentioned that upfront strategic advice and guidance to the lawyers in terms of how best to set up the reporting and governance frameworks, who can help legal teams understand is a starting point. And I recommend this for anyone as a starting point trying to implement LPM. You need to understand the widgets that you're delivering. You need to understand that, and yes, I understand that every legal matter is unique. Sure. But at the end, even every litigation follows the same broad steps. An M&A will follow the same broad steps. Most forms of finance will follow the same steps. Property and conveyancing, absolutely same steps. Trademark registrations, you name it. In the compliance and regulatory space, Section 155 will follow broadly the same process. They might be very large phases, but they broadly follow the same process. And so one of the first activities I will do will be to get the business. I'm talking lo-fi. I'm talking A3 paper and Post-it notes. I'm talking on whiteboards, but just to map out on a page for a matter type what it looks like. And that's the task that they can do themselves. They are in fact the experts. I'm just a facilitator at that point in time. They know this is their livelihood. They do this type of work day in, day out. They actually intuitively know what steps broadly happen after which ones and how long they take. And we draw up a simple Gantt chart. That's something that they can do themselves. They just need to be shown how. And from that, then we can build build an empire of project management principles. But that has to sit with the lawyers, mainly because if you do have an LPM resource, you will have one, or if you're in a top tier firm, you might have a handful. You're not going to have one per every matter. You're just not going to have that resourcing. It just won't exist. You might have them for the very largest matters. If a Royal Commission comes along, you're probably going to have an LPM or two, right? But for your average matter, it probably won't have that kind of dedicated support. The lawyers need to be able to do this themselves. And as we've seen in particular, and I think COVID or the response to the pandemic have only exacerbated, just emphasized the need for that degree of self-reliance by lawyers to be able to get on and do some of these, exhibit some of these capabilities themselves.
Absolutely. In that, there's a couple of things that you mentioned about what legal project management might look like in practice. You've got, Gantt charts, you've got whiteboards and Post-it notes. One of the questions that we want to address in this is, what are the tools that people use when they're implementing legal project management tools? Is it just spreadsheets? Are there apps or software that people need or should have? It'd be great to get a picture of what the bare bones might be. And then also, if you got to have the Rolls Royce of legal project management, what would it look like?
Oh, love these types of questions. Okay. Let's start off with, there's plenty of research, free research on the most commonly used legal tech tools used by in-house teams, for example. So CLOC, the Corporate Legal Operations Consortium, they put out an annual state of the industry. And the most, of their respondents, it's e-billing systems and management systems, and e-signature and document management systems, which are some of the most frequently used platforms by in-house teams. For private practice, it will usually revolve around a DMS, some sort of financial management system. They'll probably have a CRM, client relationship management system, and some sort of time recording software. They're some of your most common ones. I should have mentioned also in-house, normally you'll then have some sort of board management software, from a company secretarial perspective. So there's some of the most common tools or legal tech tools. LPM in particular is trying to converge this holy trinity of things that you need to deliver your work: documents, tasks, and emails, right? And it's like somehow never shall the three meet in the same location at any point in time. You can get two, but you just can't get three. Why?
Yep.
And you end up with all sorts of plugins trying to get, plugins trying to get into Outlook, for example, and you see, so iManage or NetDocs trying to integrate with Outlook, or advice or vice versa, or matter management platforms trying to suck in emails. It just seems to be really hard, right? Because emails have a bunch of tasks in them. That's how we can communicate. Well, I'll have tasks, I'll have other information. We actually then will have separate task lists tracking what's going on. And then we'll have a whole bunch of documents and other things that we're creating, which might have tasks and comments embedded in them. And the job of project management is somehow trying to consolidate all of this stuff together, right? And you mentioned at the very start about the site office, right? A key part of project management is being a centralized locale or a place where people can find, or to a certain degree, self-serve relevant information about a project that they need to do their job. So I have, strongly recommend for those that don't have a budget, let's start lo-fi. You can really do a lot with the O365 environment. In particular, tools like OneNote, absolutely brilliant in letting you. It just provides basically a digital canvas, a whiteboard environment where you can just drag and drop emails, documents, and type in tasks all onto the one page, right? It basically is it's like Microsoft Word on steroids, but with no borders. But if you can use Word, you can use OneNote. So it very easy to access. The Atlassian suite, like Confluence, is basically the same product. If you want something a little bit more structured in terms of task management, Microsoft's equivalent is called Planner, and the Atlassian equivalent is called Trello. There's also similar tools out there like Monday, for example. These are all really easy to use, drag and drop capabilities for just simply trying to track tasks, track who's responsible for them, track have they been done or not. You can link in documents. So for many out there, because particularly if you're in-house or if you're in a small, medium-sized law firm, you may not have the budget for a practice management system, matter management system. If you are at the other end of the spectrum, and you could have whatever you wanted, whatever you desired. Now there are quite a few platforms out there that do in particular do matter management, or let's just there's practice management, which is basically matter management plus usually some form of financial management and reporting, and maybe a bit of client relationship management. That's the overall practice management tools. Then you've got matter management tools, which are primarily revolve around how we actually manage an individual matter, right? So the costs associated with that, the key tasks. You also have case management systems, which basically do the same, but for litigation. And they're usually much more structured and force you to go through a particular set of stage gates, if you will. But most of the matter management systems are much less structured in their workflow. They don't really require you. And in fact, some of them have workflow management. They're more like, well, here's a platform for you to put tasks in and put documents in. We're not going to force you to go through those tasks in any particular order. So that's your kind of your remit. Along with, and just kind of on that, two particular points. Before I start naming names of product suites, it's always got to be tech enabled rather than tech led, right? There are a lot of products out there. A lot of those products are evolving. It's a very dynamic legal tech market. They're constantly buying each other. Big products subsume other smaller products. So the capabilities that you thought you had might be more. So oftentimes you see in-house teams, they've bought a product and they've got a problem and they don't realize that the product they've got actually could solve that problem, They just don't have the right license, or they didn't even know that. No one told me no one told me that could do this. Yeah, the number of times I hear that. Or they've gone out and bought a number of different point solutions to solve individual little problems, when in fact, there's this other product which does 80 to 90% of that, all within the one product, which means you save on licensing costs, which means you reduce integration risks. And in particular, one of the key issues is with this birthication, if you will, of like popping up like mushrooms, all these platforms. Lawyers are increasingly left with the issue of I've actually got too many choices here. If you've got, I've seen organizations that have the Atlassian suite, have the O365 suite, and have matter management platforms, all of which have their own reporting. So you end up with, some legal teams are putting it in, tracking their tasks in SharePoint. Others are doing it in OneNote. Others are doing it in Planner. Others are doing it in Trello, which is very confusing if you're then if you're on one team trying to understand how, what another team has done, you don't even know where to look. Is the information in SharePoint? Where is it in OneDrive? You can spend a lot of time. As knowledge workers, knowledge workers spend up to 30% of their time looking for information, right? We don't need to add fuel to the fire by now just disseminating that information across a forest of different potential platforms. There needs to be a degree of reconciliation of your tech stack, if possible. So a couple of just issues to bear in mind when you're looking at that. So my advice to most is, when you're looking out at these platforms, before you do that, understand what you're actually problem you're trying to solve. What actual capabilities do you need, and then map these products against those capabilities. And you may find that in fact one or two products can get you across the line. One of my favorite examples is DocuSign. Everyone thinks of it as just the e-discovery platform. It does a lot more than that. It's managed to, because they acquired something called Spring CM. So it does degrees of document automation. It's got e-billing capabilities. It's got a degree of contract lifecycle management in there. It's got really good business intelligence and analytics capabilities. It even does smart contracts. This is DocuSign. Everyone thinks it's just e-signatures. So that's the kind of, just when you're thinking about what products to use, be thinking about that. In terms of the now to kind of get to answer your question in terms of the actual product suites, quite a few out there that do, in particular, say, I'll just look at, say, matter management in particular. And I've got we track hundreds of legal products, which is what my eyes have kind of gone up off screen now. I'm looking at, we track hundreds of products to get a sense of, who does what. But some of the key ones that we play with. So we've got LawView, which PwC has a good experience and relationship with. There's issues like Daisy Chain. There's Cooper. Elevate have their own suite. Exigent have to agree, play in this space. Lorcadia, do part of this stuff. Or it's kind of more e-billing. There's a LexisNexis suite, which is like really advanced stuff. But they're kind of more holistic. They're like, you buy LexisNexis, that's it. You've just got you kind of, it's a bit like SAP. You're just in their environment and you're stuck with it. So also I've got, of course, the Thomson Reuters Empire. There's a lot, in terms of their legal tracker, their Matasphere, Wolters Kluwer, the same type of. We've got Zakia. There's a bunch of stuff out there. What have I missed in terms of any come to mind for you? Did I mention Clio? Clio be another one. There'd be some of the key ones. Just looking at, say, matter management in particular. That's not even getting into case management or the broader practice management stuff.
It's a huge landscape. And it seems to me that you can get mired in talking about what the best tech is, and we haven't even got past what's out there, let alone what the best tech is. And it sounds like the best thing to do is, drawing you back to your first point here, focus on the problem that you're trying to solve. And once you really know clearly what the problem is and where it occurs in a process or in a legal matter, it's much easier to talk to a sales guy, or look at a few demos yourself, or ask a management consultant who deals in this area. It all really starts with a bit of work from the purchaser's end of thinking about what the key problem is. I think, Peter, we're probably running short on time here. And what I'd love to do is just share with you 3 of my key takeaways from this session before we wrap up. And then get your thoughts on that, or give you the opportunity to say anything that we might have missed. But the 3 key takeaways are: first, LPM is really relevant. It's new, but it's also really relevant in 2021, as we know that lawyers are stressed and we know that budget pressures mount. And so it's something that people should know a bit more about in their quest to become better professionals. The second is that the principles actually aren't that foreign or complicated. I think, as I shared, most people have probably experienced what it would be like to operate in an environment where legal project management is commonplace, and it's part of what you do. And so I think people shouldn't be scared of legal project management or shy away from it. And the last is that there's an element, I think, of improving your own career or your own practice as a lawyer that you can take away from legal project management, whether you're trying to improve the services you deliver to clients as a sole practitioner, or whether you work in an in-house legal department and you just want the department to be more efficient, so you might make your way up to assistant general counsel or whatever it is. Learning a bit more about this would actually make you a better practitioner. And I think that's it's a really important thing to take away. Do you have any other thoughts or anything that I might have missed there, or anything that we haven't covered today that we need to?
Great summary. And I'll just add the final point. Really want to jump on that one. That particularly say for an in-house team, but this is equally applicable to private practice. We're talking about project management as a core competency, right? It doesn't. And once we're talking about how better to scope or use a work breakdown structure to understand what the phases of the work are, and then help develop up a cost estimate for those phases. These are key skills that apply not just to the legal work, but often to other transformation initiatives relevant to the organization. And so you just mentioned, say, with an in-house team, oftentimes it falls to the deputy general counsel to take on that quasi legal ops role if they don't already have a legal ops role. So these become, absolutely, and we've seen this time and time again with with the clients that we advise on. As they're onboarding new initiatives, in grassroots transformation initiatives, automation initiatives, or other process improvement initiatives, they need to be project managed just as much as the legal work, and these skills are directly relevant. So we're seeing that in-house teams in particular are expecting the LPM capabilities to then transfer to other broader transformation capabilities. So yes, it's not just for legal work. These are core business skills, if you will.
Absolutely. I think at least I hope this session has been valuable for people who have listened to it. I take a lot of value every time I get to speak with you, Peter. It's a real pleasure. And look, if you would like to receive updates about the work of the Center for Legal Innovation or ALPMA, please follow them on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. I'm a big fan of the CLI and ALPMA as well. I think they're doing really great things, including this. This Legal Tech and Innovation Week is free, and it's giving out a lot of great information for everyone in the industry, which is awesome. So shout out to them. Please go and check them out. And Peter, if people want to learn more, firstly about you, and then secondly about what we've discussed, where would you direct them?
Well, there's a couple of good podcasts I could probably recommend. You might have something, one or two things to say about that. There's certainly, and there's go to my LinkedIn profile, Peter Dombkins. There's plenty on there. In terms of, I do have that academic paper coming out with the Journal of Law, Technology and Humans, which will be published, I believe in February of this year.
Cool journal title, by the way.
Oh, brilliant, right? And one of the books that I do highly recommend, though not books even, it's a primer, Legal Project Management in 1 Hour for Lawyers by Richardson and Waldo. Yeah, to be fair, it takes about an hour and a half to read. So, but it was published in 2013 by the American Bar Association. Richardson and Waldo, they are some of the OGs. They're some of the original gangsters when it comes to legal project management. They were in early, and they got it right. I've since checked that book against a wide variety of very senior stakeholders, and most of what they say rings very true. It's very accessible. And so if you're wondering what LPM looks like day to day, I highly recommend that as a first step, as a good solid first step to understanding what it is.
That's awesome. I'll definitely check that out. And as I said earlier, I'm going to try and make sure that we get at least some of the things we've discussed today in links in the show notes for this. But Peter, again, thanks so much for coming on. It's been really great speaking with you, and thanks for sharing all your knowledge with us.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.